Once upon a time, the British Empire was so big that it took up a quarter of the entire globe. It ruled over a quarter of the planet and about a third of all people on Earth. This made it one of the largest empires in history and earned it the title of the empire on which the sun never sets. And while the empire is long gone today, Britain still has 14 overseas territories, including Gibraltar and the Falkland Islands, which are remnants of this once vast colonial past. But how did a small island nation turn into the biggest empire in history? Well, that's what we're going to find out today. But before we start, if you want to find out more about awesome history, then subscribe for more videos like this one. Now let's jump into it. In 1707, two kingdoms joined together to form the Kingdom of Great Britain. This new kingdom contained the island of Great Britain, which included England, Scotland and Wales, as well as the island of Ireland. Now, the political union between these kingdoms wasn't anything new. Since 1603, they had shared a monarch following the death of Queen Elizabeth I and the accession of James VI of Scotland to the throne. However, the kingdoms were still separate with their own parliaments and their own laws. Now, during the late 17th century, both Scottish and English people became increasingly frustrated at this political situation. They wanted either full political union or independence from each other. In the case of Scotland, there were some underlying economic issues contributing to the desire for change. See, Scotland's economy had recently suffered a major blow. During the 1690s, the Scottish government had become deeply involved in a settlement colony on the Isthmus of Panama called Caledonia. This colony, often referred to as the Darien Scheme, aimed to establish a Scottish settlement in Panama and trade in the lucrative market between the Americas and Europe. But after facing opposition from the Spanish, who already had colonies in the area, the colony collapsed. This failure left many Scots in poverty and increased calls for political union with England. Now, when you think of ancient Rome, you probably imagine a bustling metropolis filled with magnificent buildings and iconic monuments. But what if I told you that Rome was also home to a sophisticated and efficient waste disposal system? Welcome to Rome. Dirty Facts about the city's waste, where we explore the surprising truth behind the Roman Empire's garbage disposal. From the surprisingly modern aqueducts that carried away waste to the public bathrooms that might have been a little too close for comfort, you'll discover the shocking ways that ancient Romans dealt with their dirty business. So if you're ready to dive into the disgusting details of ancient Rome's waste disposal system, then let's get started. The Scottish people looked towards England not only because of the economic crisis in Scotland, but also because of the benefits that England's colonial ventures had brought them. During the 1600s, England had established itself as a major player in the global colonial race, and this meant that there was significant wealth to be gained through trade and exploration. These voyages had brought back not only valuable resources, but also new foods and goods that were in high demand in England. But despite these potential benefits, the path to political union was far from smooth. There were many obstacles and challenges that had to be overcome before the two kingdoms could join together. One of the main obstacles was the different legal systems in place in each kingdom. Scotland had Presbyterianism as its state religion, while England was nominally Anglican. There were also significant differences in the legal systems, which caused tensions and disputes between the two kingdoms. However, one event in particular would change everything. In 1688, England experienced a political upheaval known as the Glorious Revolution. This event led to the overthrow of King James II and the establishment of a new monarch, Mary II and her husband, William III of Orange. The revolution was sparked by James II's attempt to restore Catholicism as the state religion in England, which was seen as a threat to the established Protestant order. Mary and William, on the other hand, were Protestants, and their accession to the throne marked a significant shift in English politics. Now, the impact of the Glorious Revolution on the relationship between England and Scotland cannot be overstated. While the revolution had initially been confined to England, it quickly spread to Scotland, where many supporters of James II sought refuge. The Scottish people rallied behind the deposed king, seeing him as a fellow Protestant and a victim of a tyrannical government. But the situation soon took an unexpected turn. You see, in a surprising move, the Scottish Parliament invited Mary and William to land in Scotland and take the throne. This invitation came despite the fact that James II was still in Scotland and had a claim to the throne. The Scottish people were willing to accept Mary and William as monarchs. as long as they agreed to establish Presbyterianism as the state religion in all three of their kingdoms. This proposal was unacceptable to the English people, who saw the move as an attempt by the Scottish people to impose their religion on them. As a result, there were protests and opposition to the idea of Presbyterianism becoming the state religion in England. Eventually, Mary and William decided to accept the throne without agreeing to establish Presbyterianism as the state religion. This meant that the Scottish people were left without a champion, and the idea of political union between Scotland and England was put on hold. To make matters worse, James II, who had been living in exile in Normandy, began plotting to reclaim the throne with the help of the French king. In 1692, he invaded England with a small force, but his efforts were unsuccessful and he fled back to Normandy. Despite the failed invasion, James II continued to pose a threat to the throne of England, and so Mary and William decided to take action. In 1697, they launched a campaign against James II, known as the War of the Grand Alliance. The war was primarily fought in Ireland, where James II had strong support. The Scottish people, who had been largely loyal to James II, were caught in the middle of this conflict and suffered greatly as a result. Many Scottish soldiers were killed in the war, and the country's economy was severely impacted. By the end of the war in 1697, it was clear that James II had no chance of reclaiming the throne. He died in 1701 and was succeeded by his son, James Francis Edward, also known as the Old Pretender. With James II's death, the political situation in Britain began to change. In 1701, the English Parliament passed the Act of Settlement, which stipulated that the throne should pass to Sophia of Hanover and her Protestant heirs. This act was designed to ensure that the throne of England would remain in Protestant hands and prevent any future attempts to restore Catholicism as the state religion. The Scottish people, who had been closely tied to James II and his family, were outraged by the act. They saw it as an attempt to keep them out of the line of succession to the throne. However, the situation changed once again with the outbreak of the Spanish succession in 1701. This war was fought over the question of who would inherit the Spanish throne. The Scottish people, who had been suffering economically since the War of the Grand Alliance, saw the war as an opportunity to improve their situation. They hoped that, by supporting the winning side, they could secure favorable terms for themselves in any peace treaty that ended the war. The Scottish people's decision to participate in the war was a pivotal moment in their relationship with the English. It marked the beginning of a new chapter in which they were no longer seen as outsiders, but rather as integral members of the British political community. Anyway, as the war raged on, the Scottish people's hopes for a favorable outcome were dashed. The war ended in 1714 with the Treaty of Utrecht, which stipulated that the Spanish throne would pass to Philip V of Spain, grandson of Charles II of Spain and Louis XIV of France. This treaty was a major blow to the Scottish people, who had hoped to secure favorable terms for themselves. They felt that the English had betrayed them by making the treaty without consulting them. However, the treaty also had major implications for the future of Britain. It led to the transfer of territories such as Gibraltar and the Asinto de Negros, a trade agreement that allowed European countries to purchase enslaved Africans from Portugal. These territories and the slave trade would become important sources of wealth for Britain in the following centuries. With the Treaty of Utrecht, the stage was set for the final act in the story of how the two kingdoms came together. In 1707, the English Parliament passed the Acts of Union, which formally united the kingdoms of England and Scotland to create the Kingdom of Great Britain. The acts were met with mixed reactions in Scotland. On one hand, many Scottish people felt that they had no choice but to accept them, given the economic and political turmoil that had been plaguing their country. On the other hand, there was a sense of sadness and loss, as the Scottish people felt that their identity and culture were being erased. Despite the mixed reactions, the Acts of Union were a significant moment in British history. They marked the end of centuries of conflict and rivalry between the two kingdoms and laid the foundation for the modern United Kingdom. And that's where we'll end this episode. If you enjoyed it, please remember to subscribe and leave a comment below to let me know what you thought. I'll see you next time.